This is the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Welcome back here on Monday, September 23rd, 2019, into full swing of the football season. Yesterday, a big day in the NFL, so today I want to talk about what I'm seeing with the quarterbacks, because I think we're really witnessing history right now, so I want to touch on that for a little bit. But first, just want to remind everyone to rate and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platforms. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, SoundCloud. Basically, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find this, as well as my own website, jacksonneillpodcast.com. Post all of the episodes there, so if you need an archive, head over to there as well. So a big storyline so far this season has been QB injuries. I talked about Cam Newton last week on the podcast, explaining why I think the Carolina Panthers should move on from him and all of his injury troubles. Then Ben Roethlisberger is now sidelined. Drew Brees is out with a hand injury. Nick Foles got injured. So a ton of starting QBs all getting injured so far this season. And that's been a really big storyline. But I think what it's allowed and what has come out of it is something even bigger. And that is, we've been talking about how there's this group, this class of quarterbacks, especially from that 2004 draft class, but all kind of around that area, of QBs who have just dominated the NFL for really 15, 20 years at this point, since these guys really got into the league. Of course, I'm talking about Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Eli and Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger. That kind of group of QBs that have really been at the top of this game for so long now and that have been consistently going to Super Bowls, winning Super Bowls, and just being the best QBs in the NFL. It's just been this generation that since 2004, only once was the QB from the AFC in the Super Bowl not Brady, Roethlisberger, or Peyton Manning. That one year, 2013, was Joe Flacco. So that's just a stat to show you just how dominant these guys have been, is that they have dominated this sport for 15 years now. And, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady even being in the league a little bit then before 2004 as well. So in all of that time, there have been a couple instances where we've said, oh, this is the new class. These are the next QBs that are going to take over the mantle for these older guys. Oh, and Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III in the same draft class, 1-2. That's going to be it. Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, definitely it. Cam Newton. That these guys were the people we were expecting to take over from that incredible class of Hall of Fame QBs. And while there have been some QBs in that time that have become successful, I'm thinking Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck before his retirement, Cam Newton for a stretch there hasn't been a class. There hasn't been a group of guys like we've seen since that Hall of Fame 2004, 2005, that whole era of QBs that came into the league together and have been at the top of the game. However, if you look at since 2016, the 2016 draft, starting with that, and you look at the quarterbacks that have come into the league since then, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson. Right now, all of those guys look like franchise QBs that I just named. Then, there's other guys. Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Mitchell Trubisky. Heck, even Josh Allen is 3-0 right now with the Buffalo Bills. So when you look around the NFL, we're starting to actually see this next group of quarterbacks take hold and change the dynamic of the league. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to see Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or any of these guys who are still around just completely fall off. I mean, look at Aaron Rodgers. The guy is leading the Packers right now. They're 3-0. Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, they have one of the best point differentials in NFL history through a couple games. I don't think those guys are going anywhere. But if you look at these group of QBs, I mean, someone I just didn't even mention, Sam Darnold. He's out right now, but he's another guy. If you look at this past weekend even, Kyle Allen for the Carolina Panthers. He, in Cam Newton's place, he came in and had a monster game. So when you look around the league, we're starting to see that this next group of quarterbacks has arrived, that it's here. that this next wave of guys has come into the league. Because a lot of times you see that with QBs, there's only these kind of waves where they come in, and there's several of them at the same time that dominate the league. I mean, Young, Aikman, before that Montana was in there, and there was these guys who come into the league right around the same time, and there's just kind of that class of QBs. Forgot to mention Elway. And for 15 years, we've had that trait of all those Hall of Fame guys, and we've been looking at draft class after draft class, looking to see when is that next crop of guys going to come up, and we've seen them. Now, I think as you look at it, there still are, some definite flaws in this class. I mean, I'm not convinced on every single QB. I think Lamar Jackson has definite franchise QB potential. However, I'm still not completely sold on his accuracy. The fact that you can throw incredibly accurately against the New York Giants and Miami Dolphins this season doesn't really prove that much to me. Look how he threw the ball down the field against the Chiefs. He was pretty inaccurate when he threw the ball down the field. There's still some things like that I want to see. I look at somebody like Deshaun Watson and Carson Wentz, two QBs who have shown incredible potential, who have shown that they can really get it done in the biggest moments and carry a football team. However, health for both of them is a concern. Can we see Carson Wentz make it through a full season? Because in 2017, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, that season, Carson Wentz looked like the MVP of the league before he got knocked out with that ACL. Deshaun Watson has had incredible stretches. Even into this season, he's looked fantastic. But can he do it for a full 16-game season and then a playoff run? For both of those guys, I still have that question. Baker Mayfield, I really, really believe in him, but if you look at him so far this season, there's definitely some holes in his game, some things that I want to see him do better. I think he leaves the pocket way too quick. We saw that last night, where there were times when there was no pressure on him, that he could have stood there in the pocket, and he just elects to roll out to his right and try to make a play that way with his feet, or just make a play out throwing it outside on the run. And while it is something that separates him and shows him just how, that's a unique skill set he has, at the end of the day, you got to be able to stand in there and throw the ball down the field. So that's something a little bit more smaller, but I want to see him do that consistently. But I still think he has the potential, and he's looked like a franchise QB definitely at certain moments. And now, I mean, obviously, the huge storyline coming out of this weekend was Daniel Jones looking fantastic for the New York Giants. That's looked awesome, was a great game, but, it's the classic. You don't want to overreact to one performance too much, especially against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I can't really get a good read on that football team and see just how good they really are. Now, still, some of the decisions, that time he ran the ball in for the touchdown, that was an incredible play by him to just look off all his receivers and see, you know what, I have a lane to take it in myself. The way he threw the ball confidently was fantastic. So, I mean, you can't get much better of a start, but I think it's just you have to take it with a grain of salt and say, okay, let's see this week in and week out. And that same thing applies to Gardner Minshew, a QB who, great win against the Titans, threw 2 touchdown passes, almost had that third TD pass, but, let's see it for longer than a season. And so as I mention these guys, and as I look at this next crop of quarterbacks, I think there is one thing that's really helped them, and maybe is a reason why we're starting to see this new group of guys explode onto the scene right now, whereas the past couple draft classes, the past times we thought that Andrew Luck and RG3 are going to take the league by storm, Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, or dozens of other QBs in that similar time frame that were first-round picks, and they just didn't pan out and didn't create a kind of class like this. I think, first of all, is just the talent of these guys. It just happened to be that a lot of these guys are super talented. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is one of those arms where I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it watching football. He's just incredible. But also, I think the penalties, and I think the way that the game is called nowadays with the roughing the passer call, that the way that now defensive players even can get called for roughing the passer on a sack, something that I don't know if I agree with completely, but just the way that we're protecting QBs now, where if you even fall on top of them after you tackle them, that's a penalty. I think that what that does is it does 2 really big things. One, it extends drives, because many times you're dropping back to throw on third downs, and if you did not throw a completion, if you threw an incomplete pass, but the defender just happens to get that roughing the passer call that they're calling way more nowadays, then that's going to extend your drive, give you more opportunities to get to the end zone, put up better stats, and continue your offense. And also, too, I think it helps QBs stay healthy for a longer period of time. Now, if you look, there has been, like I did mention, there have been some QB injuries this season, but one, that Drew Brees injury was incredibly fluky. How many times have you ever seen that, where the quarterback's throwing the football and his hand runs into the hand of a defensive player? That's just a complete fluke. I don't see that that's more of an exception to the rule. And then for Ben Roethlisberger getting injured, at this point he is taking so many shots in his career that that's just, you can't look at Ben Roethlisberger and say that QBs aren't staying healthy. The guy has just been taking shot after shot in his career, and for the past about 5 years or so, he's never playing full 16-game seasons, so him getting injured really doesn't prove all that much. But by keeping these younger guys healthy, by doing a bigger job so that they're not taking as many hits, that means they can feel more comfortable in the pocket, because they know that those defensive players, they're coming in pursuit of them, but those defensive players, there's now more pressure on them to not get called for roughing the passer, that even if they have a full head of steam, as soon as that quarterback throws the football, they got to get out of the way. And maybe that impacts the way that they run after the passer. Maybe it impacts the way they're able to go after the QB, that maybe pass rushing and defensive ends aren't getting there just as quick as they used to, or with as much intensity as they used to, because they don't want to get that penalty called on them. That gives younger QBs the opportunity to stand in the pocket maybe for a little bit longer, or at the very least feel more comfortable in the pocket, thinking, you know what, this defensive player, if he's going to come through and hit me, but the hits aren't that hard anymore. That it used to be you stood in the pocket and you threw that football and you got absolutely obliterated afterwards. You got thrown to the ground. This giant hulking defensive player who's weighs 150 more pounds than you, or 100 pounds heavier than you, lands on top of you, so you really got to think twice about the next time you stand in there. Nowadays, though, you stand in there, you throw that ball, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is that player's going to kind of come through and push you, and you maybe just fall to the ground lightly. Or maybe you fall to the ground a little bit harder, but it's nothing compared to what it was before these roughing the passer calls got started. So even if your time is the same amount as it used to be, you're not taking as many hits. You're able to stand in the pocket more comfortably and confidently because you don't have to worry about getting completely nailed. I mean, the only guy that I've really seen get completely nailed like that recently was that time that Nick Foles got injured. That's a perfect example, is that plays like that don't really happen anymore, where the quarterback gets nailed like that after throwing the football. And since they don't happen, you don't see as many injuries like Nick Foles. So that allows these younger guys to stay in the game, extend their drives with the penalties, as well as just feel confident in the pocket and throw the ball downfield and get those more passing opportunities. So I think that whole roughing the passer call has a big effect and has really helped this generation of QBs become that next one for the NFL, because we're seeing it right now. It's the changing of the guard right now. Now, I'm not counting out the Patriots. I'm not counting out the Packers. If it was Green Bay versus New England in this year's Super Bowl, I would not be completely surprised. But what I'm saying is that 2 years from now, I'd be incredibly surprised. That 2 years from now, I'm expecting all these young guys we're seeing right now starting to really make some noise, led by guys like Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. I'm going to be expecting them to be that next class of QBs, those next Hall of Fame quarterbacks that dominate the NFL for the next decade plus. And that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, make sure to subscribe and rate this podcast on your favorite listening platforms. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For more episodes of my music discussion podcast and my interview series, Anything Goes with Jackson Neill, go over to jacksonneillpodcast.com. Link to that in the show notes. Also, if you're a really big fan of the show, and I hope you are, maybe consider becoming a subscriber on Patreon. Over there, you get access to cool bonus content for just a couple dollars a month, or even $1 a month. I write, record, and produce these podcasts myself as a full-time college student, so any little bit of support really does go a long way and allows me to spend more time making these cool podcasts. So, link to Patreon down in the show notes. Also, if you want to stay up to date on everything I'm doing, all the podcasts I publish, everything I'm up to, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JacksonNeill20. Today's music is by Analog by Nature with their song CDK Sunday. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you all next time.